Once upon a time, we lived in a golden age of advertising. That's how we got our information, right? True scientific claims. But then, in that world, everyone was consuming the same information in the same way at the same time. But then we got this magical magnifying glass. And with the age of the internet and search engines, all of a sudden, we as consumers were the ones in control. So that way we could figure out, okay, were Lucky Strikes toasted or are they going to kill me? All of a sudden, the power totally shifted. And turns out we kind of like power. So things started changing on the way that we took in information as well. All of a sudden, we got TiVo. So we didn't have to watch all those advertisements. We could skip past them if we didn't want to watch them. And then, with the launch of Netflix streaming service, traditional TV advertising as we knew it died. Right? We're living in a fundamentally different world than the typical Lucky Strikes toasted era. And now, I'd argue that the only thing that really captures human attention is it's as old as human history and yet more important than ever. And that is the power of storytelling. But first, before I go into why storytelling, I'll give you a little bit of my backstory so you know why I'm up here. So I'm at my core an oil painter and an artist. And I grew up, watching Disney movies and sketching out little flip books on Post-it notes. And then went to be a studio art major in college. And visuals were always really important for me as a means of self-expression. But then, like any good oil painter, I started my career as a management consultant at Bain Company. And at Bain, I saw that visuals actually weren't just powerful for self-expression, they were really powerful for communication. And I know that you all probably know this, but when we would prepare a deck for a steering committee, it'd be 80, 100 slides. The CEO cared about one, maybe two. And that was the super clear, simple visual that captured the whole answer to the case, right? Sometimes it was a chart, sometimes it was a diagram, but it was always visual. It was never the word wall of bullet points. And with Bain, we called those the $1 million slides. But here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that most of us aren't trained in art. So in the business world, you don't have a ton of people who are doing the analysis and the design because our education system's split. And even if you do, they take forever, right? It's like PowerPoint takes so long. And so I realized started doing my MBA at Stanford, and everyone's a tech entrepreneur at Stanford, and I started really looking into how does software work, and I realized, okay, if I've got a process, then I can break that process into steps, and I can turn it into a program so that anyone can do this. And so learned to code and kind of built up the first version of the product and started with B2B sales and said, this is where visual content's most important. But here's what I figured out. Was that it wasn't just about visualizing content. It was actually about storytelling. Because if you're visualizing bad content, it's a little bit better, but it's not actually going to make the difference. And this is why it's so important in sales today. So we used to live in a world where you're pitching you have a field sales rep working for Oracle, goes and pitches a $3 million 3-year contract. You have a polished PowerPoint presentation, you sign on the dotted line, and you're set. You got 3 years to coast. Now, that contract value is $15K, right? You can't afford to send that sales rep there. And besides, you don't have the full boardroom of decision makers in one place. You've got an average of 7 to 8 buyers in any B2B deal today, and they're getting information everywhere from Googling you, to reading your blog, to checking out a demo, to doing a trial with their team, going through the onboarding process, QBR meetings, making sure you're actually using the product. This is so much more complicated today. And if you can't capture people's attention, then you're dead in the water. So dachshund did a recent report on testing this out, saying all right, does this whole story thing actually work, or is this just a feel good? And they found that when they had marketing content that was really oriented around a clear storyline, that they had 3x completion rates on that content. So this actually matters for your sales process. But how do you do it? This magical art of storytelling, how do you actually break it down? So today I'm going to talk through a couple of key steps that everyone in this room can apply. So first is understanding what's the core value that your company or product orients around. Like, what is the one thing? Rather than building this narrative, this linear narrative, which is the vast majority of sales decks today, instead think about inside out. Like, what is the core value? And then you build the structure around it, and then you build the content around it. So how do you figure out what this value is? So as I dove into this problem, I realized that businesses are not that different from people, right? We've got needs. And so taking the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and applying it to the business, I found that, there's a range. Like, some products in this room, some companies in this room are really on the basic survival, right? The pitch is like, listen, we're going to get you more revenue so you can live to tomorrow. All the way up to helping a company self-actualize. We're going to help you, achieve your mission and everything in between. And I think that the biggest challenge I've seen when working with companies with this is we want to say, but we do all of them. We help you. We help you sell more, and we help you save money, and we help you, your employees be happier. Say, pick one, because the more focused you are with your story, that the whole purpose of the story is to capture the attention. And once you've got their attention, sure, pile on, the logical sell as well. But the key is really knowing, where do you fall on this? And then once you've oriented around that need or value, understanding that story's all about change. Story's all about, every human emotion kind of comes into two buckets. It's pain and pleasure. And you want to be able to take your customers from pain. What pain are they feeling on that need? And then you want to be able to promise them a better future. And here's kind of if there's like one visual that would add value to your companies today, I would say being really clear on what this is. And it's, what is the old world and what is the new world? And do this as a team exercise, brainstorm. Like, what does the world look like if you don't even exist? What is the pain that your customer is feeling? And then what is this new world that you're creating after your product? And it's beyond your product, right? It's way bigger than just you, and it's certainly bigger than your feature set. Step 2 is structure. So the classic deck reads like a list. And instead, story should be dynamic. You're taking that charge, that idea of going from negative to positive, and you're alternating it. Because human attention is drawn to change, because that's the way that we're wired, right? And so if you can create a story that is more dynamic, one, you capture your attention, and two, you're being more honest. Because no one, so many of the customer success stories, jumping ahead a bit, but so many of the customer success stories or case studies are, so-and-so achieved 200x revenue with our product. It's like, not really. It was, who are the human beings behind that, right? Like, that was a hard process. It was required onboarding. There were probably some pitfalls in the beginning, right? Like, it's more dynamic. And so that's a way to capture their attention and also really communicate how they too can get value out of your product. The status quo today is featureless, right? It's like, look at all of the things our product can do. But instead, think about shifting the point of view. So you're not talking about it from the product's point of view, you're actually talking about it from the human beings who are using your product's point of view. This is a classic example. So on the left is a feature list for Office 365. Inspiring, right? And then on the right is the master of this, Salesforce. The hero of that story is not Benioff. It is the Adidas team, right? And it's about, like, what did the Adidas team do how did they take action with Salesforce, but it's not Salesforce as the protagonist. And to think about this as, you've got, kind of depending on who you're talking to is a way to flex the story. You can have the same core value that is consistent throughout all of your stories, but you can flex it based on that point of contact. So if you're talking to, another CEO, then the character is really it's about a company. It's a company level, right? And the world that you want to dominate is the market. But if you go in talking to a sales rep about dominating the market, like they don't care about the market. They care about hitting their number, right? So match the way that you're speaking with the person you're actually speaking to. And here's kind of the way to make it concrete here. When you're thinking about your customer case studies, splitting it into what is the catalyst, the cause, and the effect, right? The real cause is the people behind your product, the people on your customer side, and then your product is the catalyst. Your product isn't the cause, right? Software doesn't make everything magically better on its own, and making sure that you're retaining that human element, so that then the effect is really about the customer's success, truly, not just the cool new feature. Step 3 is content. So this is the problem that I started to solve with Stick, of just seeing so much of the content, because the tools we have, right, is long form text, right? We're writing really long emails, we have lots of bullet points in our slides, and it's very dense, and it's hard to stay the center of attention when you're competing with really text-heavy stuff. So instead, thinking of how do you simplify the message as much as possible into simple visuals? Because once you have those simple visuals, one, the recall is so much higher. It's more that's the way that your message actually transfers, right? And it's also more consistent. So a couple of examples here. One, on a simple symbol can not only tell your story, but totally spark a movement. So again, the Salesforce example, right? Benioff literally created a category with this symbol, because it communicates, what do you stand for? What do you stand against? And what is this new world that we're trying to build? Second, this simple before and after. So Zora described this whole new world that created the need for their product, right? But this idea that look, this isn't just about Zora. This is about the world has fundamentally shifted from being product-driven and channel-driven into actually now, this is about the subscriber, and the subscriber is the center of this world. And if you're not prepared for that, you're going to lose, right? And then you're saying, wow, okay, I buy into that. Tell me more about Zora. That's the goal. It doesn't come off as advertising. It's actually describing this new environment. And then finally, metaphor. So the Drift has done a really good job of using this metaphor to say, David Cancel say, would you invite your customers into an empty store? No. You want to greet them at the door and say, hey, how can I help you? And so tying in, using metaphor and simple visuals to really make that story, that before and after visceral, makes it such that it can transfer. So in closing, story sells, right? This is not just something that is about sales, though. This is really at the core of everything you do. This is how you hire. This is how you raise money. This is how you build better products. As CEOs, this is your job. This is not something that can be kind of relegated to marketing to come up with a cool new campaign. This is actually our jobs, because we are the core of the company, and we have to get everyone on the same page. Because if you're telling different stories across, it will break up the organization. So in conclusion, on values, make sure you pick one and make that the core of everything that you do. And you can use that need stack, the Maslow's hierarchy for business, to help you out. 2, on structure, make sure you're structuring your story from the customer's point of view, not your products. Make them the protagonist of the story, because when you're selling to other customers, that's who they relate to. They don't relate to your software because they're a person, right? And make sure that you're making that jump easier for them. And then finally on content, relying on simple, clear visuals as much as possible, because that's how your message actually travels. Because in today's B2B environment, you've got a conversation with a prospect, and then that prospect has to go be your sales rep. You can't turn it into a game of telephone.